She laughed when she told me she didn't need me anymore. Everyone else in that crowded restaurant thought it was a joke. They didn't hear the quiet way she said it, the way her voice didn't tremble at all. "I don't need you now, Mark," she said, sipping champagne like she was toasting her freedom. That night, she celebrated her promotion to partner at the law firm. I celebrated the end of an illusion I'd spent 15 years building. And believe me, she had no idea what was coming next. Before I continue, if you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or called useless by someone you gave your life to, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me your story in the comments. You'll want to stay till the end. The evening had been planned for weeks. Her coworkers had rented out the entire rooftop lounge downtown. String lights, live jazz, polished wine glasses that caught the city glow. I'd spent the whole afternoon helping the event planner set up the projector and arrange the name cards. When Evelyn walked in, heads turned. Black dress, red lipstick, and that smile. The same one that used to make me forget how tired I was after working late shifts at the print shop. She spotted me standing by the bar and gave me a look halfway between gratitude and embarrassment. I wasn't part of her world anymore, not really. These were lawyers, consultants, polished people with careers that came with titles and glass offices. I was just the husband who fixed the sink, mowed the lawn, and made sure the bills got paid on time. Still, I smiled, because I'd been there from day one, when she was taking night classes, when we couldn't afford takeout, when she failed her first bar exam and cried in my arms for hours. I believed in her long before the firm did. As the speeches started, I stood near the back, clapping at the right moments, nodding at jokes I didn't understand. Her managing partner, a tall man with silver hair and a perfect voice for microphones, raised a glass. "To Evelyn Carter," he said, "the youngest partner this firm has ever had." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed. She stepped forward to accept a bouquet of white lilies and kissed him on the cheek, longer than necessary. People laughed and whistled. Then she took the mic. "I couldn't have done this without support," she said, glancing at me briefly before turning back to the crowd. Mark was, well, he was always there. That hesitation, that tiny pause, it sliced through me. I caught the way her coworker, that same silver-haired partner, smirked at the word. After her speech, people drifted toward the dance floor. I tried to congratulate her, but she was surrounded. Men in tailored suits, women with perfect nails, everyone talking about next year's cases and big bonuses. So I waited by the bar, nursing the same drink I'd had since we arrived. When the party started to thin, Evelyn finally approached me. "You look tired," she said casually, like I was some overworked employee. "You can head home if you want." "I wanted to celebrate with you," I said. "This is our win, right?" She looked at me for a long moment. And then, God help me, she actually laughed. "Mark, this is my win." Something in my chest went cold. The bartender must have seen the change in my face because he slid me a glass of water without asking. Evelyn kept talking, words slicing clean and sharp. "You've always been supportive, and I'll always appreciate that, but things are different now. My life is moving faster. You wouldn't understand." "Wouldn't understand what?" I asked quietly. She shrugged, reached into her purse, and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I think it's time we stop pretending this is working." I unfolded it slowly. It wasn't a love note. It was a divorce petition already signed. "I've met someone," she said softly, almost kindly. "I didn't plan for it, but it happened. His name's Richard, the silver-haired partner." Of course, the room spun, but my face didn't change. No yelling, no scene. Just silence so thick it made her shift uncomfortably. "You're serious," I said. "I am," she replied. "You deserve someone who can make you happy." I almost laughed at that. Instead, I folded the papers neatly and slid them back toward her. "You're right," I said. "I do." She expected a reaction, rage, tears, maybe even a desperate plea. But she got none of it. I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and said, "Congratulations on your promotion, Evelyn. You've finally earned everything you wanted." Then I left her standing there in that golden rooftop light, clutching a bouquet that was already starting to wilt. What she didn't know was that her celebration marked the beginning of my plan, one that would take everything she thought she owned and leave her questioning who really built her perfect life. I didn't go home that night. I drove for hours through empty streets, headlights flickering across the wet pavement until the city disappeared behind me. Somewhere outside of Denver, I pulled into a 24-hour diner, ordered black coffee, and stared at my reflection in the window. 15 years. 15 years of working overtime, paying her tuition, ironing her shirts before interviews, listening to every fear and failure she ever whispered. And she threw it all away between champagne toasts and applause. But what hit me hardest wasn't the betrayal. It was how calm I felt, like something inside me had gone completely still. Maybe because, deep down, I'd been waiting for this moment. Evelyn had been pulling away for years. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. Not revenge exactly, but something colder. Precise. She thought I was predictable, the man who would crawl away quietly, sign whatever she put in front of me, and fade into the background. She had no idea that everything she'd built was sitting on foundations I controlled. I'd spent years managing our finances, paying the mortgage, investing in the property next door when the owner fell behind. She never cared about the details. She was too busy chasing prestige. That ignorance was about to cost her more than she could imagine. I drove back home later that morning, parked in our driveway, and noticed her car was already gone. She hadn't wasted a second. Inside, the house felt like a showroom. Polished, cold, impersonal. I poured myself a drink and walked from room to room, remembering the nights we'd painted these walls, the arguments, the laughter, the silence that eventually replaced both. On her nightstand sat the silver watch I'd given her after she passed the bar exam. I left it there. Let her remember time every time she looked at that empty space. At noon, I called our bank. Evelyn had always assumed our joint account was where all our savings went. It wasn't. Years earlier, after one too many impulsive shopping sprees, I'd opened a separate account for emergency funds, mine alone. She never asked about it, never checked. I transferred my half of the savings into it, closed the joint account, and paid off the remainder of the home equity loan she didn't even know existed. By the end of the day, the mortgage, property tax, and insurance were all in my name. Legally, the house was mine. That evening, I packed my tools, photo albums, and a small black box from the safe. Inside were documents Evelyn had signed without reading, agreements for the property next door, business paperwork for the printing shop she thought was failing, and a deed transfer she'd approved because I told her it was for refinancing. In truth, it made me the sole owner of both properties. She had been too distracted with work to notice. When she came home later, she didn't expect to find me there. Her expression was neutral, professional, like we were in a board meeting instead of our living room. "You're still here," she said. "For now," I replied. "You forgot your papers." She gave a small laugh. "You're taking this surprisingly well." "I've had practice," I said, pouring myself another drink. "You've been leaving me for years, Evelyn. This is just the first time you put it in writing." She hesitated. "I hope you can understand. I didn't mean to hurt you." I looked at her, really looked, at the woman who had once cried because she failed an exam, who used to fall asleep with casebooks spread around her like protective walls. "You didn't hurt me," I said quietly. "You freed me." Her brow furrowed slightly, but she didn't ask what I meant. She was too sure she'd already won. 2 days later, I was gone. I left the house spotless, keys on the counter, a single note taped to the fridge. It said, "Good luck with the new chapter." I didn't leave a forwarding address. She'd discover soon enough that her chapter didn't include the home she thought she owned. I drove to Santa Fe, where my brother owned a small renovation company. He'd been asking me for months to join him, to help expand the business. Within a week, I was managing projects, using skills I hadn't realized I'd built over years of maintaining our house. The work was honest, physical, exhausting in the best way. At night, I slept soundly for the first time in years. Meanwhile, the silence from Evelyn grew louder. First came the polite text messages, then the frustrated ones. "We need to talk. The bank says something's wrong with the mortgage." I deleted them all. Then came the voicemail. "Mark, they're saying the house isn't in my name. You need to fix this." I didn't, because it wasn't her house. It never had been. By the end of that month, I learned through a mutual friend that she'd been forced to move out temporarily. Apparently, she'd told everyone the paperwork was just a misunderstanding. But I knew her well enough to picture her pacing the empty living room, realizing that for the first time in her life, she didn't have control. I didn't feel joy or triumph, just peace. I wasn't interested in destroying her. I just wanted to reclaim the years I'd lost serving her ambitions. I started hiking on weekends, joined a local photography group, even fixed up an old Chevy truck that reminded me of my father's. Life became simple again, quiet, but full. 3 months later, a letter arrived at my brother's office. She must have hired someone to track me down. The envelope was thin, neat, and smelled faintly of her perfume. Inside was a single line written in her perfect handwriting. "You won't get away with this." I smiled, because she still didn't understand. I already had. And while she was scrambling to rebuild what she thought was hers, I was just getting started building something new. Something she would never touch again. 6 months passed before I heard her name again. By then, Santa Fe had become home. I'd bought a small adobe-style house at the edge of town, a place that smelled of cedar and sun-baked earth. Work was steady. My brother and I had turned our renovation company into something respectable, even profitable. I'd grown a beard, lost weight, and found that people listened to me differently now, not as some man living in his wife's shadow, but as someone who built things with his own hands. Then one afternoon, while I was finishing paperwork in the office, my brother came in holding a letter. "Mark, this came for you. Looks important." I recognized the handwriting instantly. Evelyn. The return address was her law firm in Denver. I didn't open it right away. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stared at the envelope, remembering how her handwriting used to fill our grocery lists, birthday cards, and holiday notes. Now it was an intrusion from a life I no longer lived. When I finally tore it open, the letter was short. "I need to see you. There are legal issues we must discuss. Please contact me immediately." No apology, no emotion, just that tone of control she always used when she thought authority could fix everything. I smiled and tossed it into the drawer. Whatever issues she had weren't mine anymore. A few weeks later, she found another way to reach me. One of our old mutual friends, Julia, called out of nowhere. "Mark, she's in trouble," Julia said. "The firm's collapsing. Her partner, Richard, got caught embezzling from clients. There's an investigation. She might lose everything." I listened quietly, letting Julia fill the silence with gossip and half-truths. Apparently, Evelyn had built her empire on promises that were now falling apart. I thanked Julia for the update, wished her well, and hung up. For the first time in years, I felt something like closure. She had traded loyalty for ambition, and ambition had turned on her. 3 weeks later, I walked into a coffee shop near the plaza after finishing a client meeting. The place was quiet except for the sound of soft jazz and the hiss of steaming milk. I was scanning the menu when a familiar voice said my name. "Mark." I turned, and there she was. Evelyn looked nothing like the woman I'd last seen under those rooftop lights. Her hair was shorter, duller. Her eyes had that sleepless glaze people get when life refuses to cooperate. She was thinner, too, but not in a healthy way. I didn't move. She hesitated, then stepped closer. "Please," she said, "don't walk away." I nodded toward the empty chair across from me. She sat down slowly, clutching her purse like it was a shield. "How did you find me?" I asked. "It wasn't hard," she said. "You used to pay taxes. Paper trails are stubborn things." I almost laughed. "What do you want?" I asked. She exhaled shakily. "To talk. To explain." For a long moment, we sat there in silence. Then she began. "After you left, everything went wrong. The firm started struggling. Richard wasn't who I thought he was. He..." She stopped, looking down. "He was married. He left the firm before the investigation began. Everyone blamed me." I didn't react. She kept talking, filling the air with excuses, regrets, fragments of explanations that all circled the same truth. She had destroyed herself chasing something that never existed. When she finally looked up, her voice cracked. "You were the only one who ever believed in me." I met her gaze. "And you were the only one who ever convinced me I wasn't enough." That's a powerful trick. She reached across the table, her hand trembling. "I was wrong," she said. "About everything. I thought independence meant cutting people out. But I didn't realize how much of my success came from you. Your patience, your support, your work. I can't fix the past, but I want to make things right." Her words might have meant something once, but now they were just echoes. I leaned back, watching her closely. "You want forgiveness," I said. "No," she replied softly. "I just want peace." I nodded slowly, then stopped chasing ghosts. She flinched as if I'd hit her. "You hate me," she whispered. "No," I said. "I don't hate you. I outgrew you." That was the moment she realized I wasn't the same man she'd left behind. The quiet one. The one who accepted humiliation with silence. The one who worked without recognition. That man was gone. She tried one last time. I heard you bought a business, she said. Maybe we could. I interrupted her. No, Evelyn. You made your choices. I made mine. And this time, I'm not going to save you from their consequences. She stood up then, blinking fast, trying not to cry. I never meant for it to end like this. Neither did I said. But endings don't ask for permission. She nodded, placed a 20 on the table for a drink she never finished, and walked out. Through the window, I watched her cross the plaza, swallowed by the afternoon light, her posture slumped, her pace uncertain. It should have felt satisfying, seeing her small and lost after years of towering above me. But instead, I felt something else, pity, maybe even gratitude. She'd taught me the cost of giving everything to someone who only loves what you can provide. A week later, an envelope arrived from Denver. Inside was a check, a large one, and a note, for what I took, for what I ruined. Don't contact me again. I never cashed it. I locked it away in a drawer, a monument to lessons learned. Life went on. Our company expanded, clients doubled, and I started mentoring younger builders who reminded me of who I used to be: hopeful, patient, naive. Some nights, when the desert wind swept through the open windows, I'd think of Evelyn, not with anger, but with a strange kind of peace. She had given me the gift of starting over, even if she'd meant to break me instead. I didn't know it yet, but her story wasn't quite finished. She would come back once more, not for forgiveness this time, but for something far more dangerous. It was almost 2 years before I saw her again. By then, my life had taken on a quiet rhythm that I loved. The business had grown beyond anything my brother and I imagined. We'd bought 3 more properties, hired a full crew, and started taking on restoration projects across New Mexico and Arizona. I spent my weekends hiking the mesas, photographing old churches, sometimes just sitting on the porch watching the light fade over the desert. I'd met someone, too, Anna, a teacher who loved simplicity and never asked about the past unless I offered it. She made life feel calm, real, and unpretentious. It wasn't the fireworks I once mistook for love. It was something steadier, something earned. Then, one hot afternoon in June, while I was reviewing blueprints at the office, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but habit made me answer. "Mark," said a familiar voice, strained and shaky. "It's Evelyn." For a second, I didn't speak. The sound of her name felt foreign in my mouth. "How did you get this number?" I asked. "Please don't hang up," she said quickly. "I need to see you. It's important." I could hear traffic behind her, maybe from downtown Denver. "It's about the house," she added. I laughed softly. "That house hasn't been yours in years, Evelyn. There's nothing left to discuss." "There's everything to discuss," she said, and then her voice broke. "I'm sick, Mark." The words hit harder than I expected. "What do you mean, sick?" "Cancer. Late stage. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months." Silence filled the line. I didn't know what to feel: anger, pity, disbelief. "I'm not calling for money," she said after a moment. I need to talk to you. In person." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Not because I owed her anything, but because there was a time when I would have crossed oceans to comfort her. That version of me deserved closure as much as she did. 2 weeks later, she arrived in Santa Fe. I met her at a small park near the old cathedral. She looked fragile, her hair thinner, skin pale and stretched. She wore a scarf despite the heat, and when she smiled, it was with effort. "You look good," she said. "You look alive," I replied. We sat on a bench in the shade, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she said quietly, "I'm not here to ask forgiveness. I just wanted to see you once more before." She trailed off, staring at the church bells in the distance. I waited. She pulled a small envelope from her purse and handed it to me. Inside was a handwritten letter and a folded photograph of us from years ago, taken the day she passed the bar exam. We were both younger, full of pride, unaware of what would come next. "I found it while going through old things," she said. "I'd forgotten how happy we looked." Her voice trembled. "I wanted you to know something before it's too late. You were never dead weight. You were the reason I got anywhere at all. I just didn't realize it until there was nothing left." I read the letter silently. It was an apology, not the shallow kind people give to ease their conscience, but the raw, painful kind that comes when someone finally sees the damage they've done. She wrote about the nights she stayed awake wondering if I'd built a new life, The shame she felt every time she told someone she was divorced, the regret that came like a tide she couldn't stop. When I finished reading, I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. I don't know what you want me to say, I told her. You don't have to say anything, she replied. Just promise me one thing. Don't waste your life being angry. I did that, and it destroyed everything I loved. I nodded slowly. I'm not angry anymore, Evelyn. I haven't been for a long time. She smiled faintly, and for a moment, I saw the woman I used to love. The ambition, the confidence, the spark. You always were better at moving on than I was, she said. I looked out at the plaza, at people laughing, children running through the fountains, sunlight glinting off the stone. No, I said. I just finally learned how to let go. We talked for another hour. About nothing important, just small memories that had somehow survived the years. When it was time to leave, she stood, a little unsteady on her feet. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For not hating me. I almost smiled. You made me stronger, Evelyn. Maybe that's enough. She touched my arm briefly, then turned and walked toward the street. I watched until she disappeared around the corner. 3 months later, Julia called to tell me that Evelyn had passed away. The funeral was small, attended mostly by former colleagues and a few distant relatives. I didn't go. Instead, I drove out to the desert at dawn, the sky turning from gray to gold, and read her letter one last time. Then I burned it, watching the ashes scatter on the wind. That night, I sat with Anna on the porch, the air still warm, stars beginning to appear. I told her everything. The marriage, the betrayal, the silence, the meeting in the park. She listened without interrupting, holding my hand the whole time. When I finished, she said softly, "You did the right thing. You let her leave twice, once in anger and once in peace." For the first time in years, I felt completely free. Not because I'd won, not because she'd lost, but because the past no longer owned me. Life had come full circle. Evelyn got what she thought she wanted, independence. I got what I truly needed, peace. Sometimes the real victory isn't revenge or justice. It's walking away and never looking back. If you've ever had to rebuild after someone broke you, if you've learned that silence can be louder than any argument, you already understand this story. And if you've made it this far, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because sometimes, the quietest endings are the ones that stay with us forever.